راية واحدة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to the, I think, 5th episode of the deep dive into the Nizam al-Islam, the system of Islam, by Sheikh Taqiyuddin al-Nabahani. In the previous session, we discussed the nature of comprehensive idea, what makes it a comprehensive idea, and we said that there is a difference between, there are two types of ideas in this regard. We said that an idea can just like, to be clear, what we said was that the answers to the questions we mentioned, what I like to call the origin questions, the answers could be divided into two sections. That is a comprehensive one and an incomprehensive answer. We say that only a comprehensive answer can lead to revival. Only a comprehensive answer can lead to revival. Now, what we are going to discuss today is a continuation of that conversation. And we will be continuing from this little green section where the Sheikh says, this solution wouldn't lead to the correct revival nahda unless it is a true solution, which is compatible with man's nature, with man's innate nature, fitrah, and convinces the mind and thus fills the heart with tranquility. You see, we said that these answers, we established that these answers are the greatest solution. They solve the greatest problem that man will ever face, because man has a quest for revival. Why does man have a quest for revival? Because he needs direction. He needs to have a meaning. He needs to be different from the animal. And we then said, does it mean that the declined people are like animals? We said there is a possibility they can even be worse. This is because the animal does not have a mind to utilize. So in whichever way he behaves, it is expected that he will always the animal will always resort to his instincts and organic needs. Whereas the human being is expected to use his mind. The convolution of mixing the mind and your instinct without control leads to man being worse than an animal, because he will be confused without even realizing how confused he is. So that's why we say that it's essential that man, a nation, is revived. Now, this revival is not necessarily correct. Now we are going into the issue, the issue of we all want revival, but the answer we gave about revival, what we said will lead to revival, it's a matter that can be attained from different angles. We already mentioned that there are several possible answers to these questions. Now, is it then said that the answers, whichever possible answer we give, can lead to the desired revival? Or is it not? Because what we need to understand is that we are not just seeking mere revival. Man needs to believe in the revival that he acquires, that he attains. So, and it is not plausible to ask, why do we need the revival to be correct? This is because it will be contradictory to the very nature of revival, or rather the quest for revival itself. The people that seek revival must be people that pursue the the best of things. And this is something we will see below in the very next paragraph, inshallah, why it is so. However, now we need to understand, what we need to understand is that this survival needs to be correct. And there are conditions that make it correct. So what we are saying here is that, yes, the revival, there are many answers that could lead to revival. There are many comprehensive ideas, intellectual basis that could lead to revival. But not all of them are correct. I dare say only one of them is correct. All the rest are wrong. But how do we determine? How do we determine that the revival is correct or incorrect? Since we are trying to solve human problems, then this answer, this comprehensive idea, must be in compatibility with human nature. The question now here is, why does it need to be in compatibility with human's nature, with man's innate nature? It is because, the reason is because our actions emanate from our nature. Our actions emanate from our nature. It is our nature that instigates us, that stimulates us into action. This is because this nature is a type that requires satisfaction. It is a type that requires satisfaction. So because of this, we find out that the answer must be incompatible with this nature. But what is this nature that we are talking about in the first place? This innate nature, we have already mentioned it, but now we will go into it a little bit and discuss them. We will discuss the reality and essence of this nature, and so that we understand how they apply to our actions. But before we go in there, if it is said that our actions emanate, or rather are stimulated and instigated by our fitrah, nature, can't we say that we are already the same with the animals, that we have been trying to say man needs to distinguish himself from animals? Because animals, as we mentioned just earlier, animals also behave according to their nature. But this is something we have already answered. The answer is that man has the mind, and the animal doesn't. So the animal will always resort to his mind, whereas we as humans, the animal will always resort to his nature, innate nature, but man will satisfy his nature based on what he believes to be right, meaning he thinks. Now, our fitrah is what we call the vital energy. The vital energy is divided into two. The first one is the organic need. The organic need is the type of nature where man needs to satisfy time to time. What that means is that it is called organic because it does not require external factors or elements to instigate it. The second innate nature, the second type of vital energy is our instincts. And our instincts require, our instincts require external elements and forces to provoke or stimulate or even instigate them. Going back to the issue of the organic needs, the organic needs are like hunger, the need to visit the toilet, sleep, thirst, and things that without satisfaction harmed or even die as a result of not satisfying them. If a man spends days without eating, without drinking water, he gets harmed or even ends up dying. If man, excuse me, if excuse me correctly, it's not charging. Okay, sorry about that. So if man does not satisfy these needs, he gets harmed. This is because the organic need is internal. It's what we, because without satisfying it, man gets harmed and or even dies as a result. Okay, and then the fitra, the instincts, is a need that man only needs to satisfy when there is urgency for it. What that means is that, unlike the organic need, it is actually not necessary to satisfy it, though it would have been better if it was satisfied. It would have been better if it was satisfied. So man needs to satisfy his instincts, but it does not mean that he must satisfy them, because they require external factors to provoke them. The instincts are of three types. There is the sanctification instinct, the reproductive instinct, and the survival instincts. These instincts are actually the major factors that instigate our actions. Yes, we all seek food, we seek to drink water, we seek to do all those things, but most of the time, these are things that do not affect our ways of life, although it doesn't mean they are not part of it. No, they are. However, our instincts are the main things that drive the way we live. This is because the way we satisfy them, they occupy most of the endeavors that we carry out. And of course, this is in conjunction with the organic needs. Some try to indicate which of the instinct is much more important. They say that some will say that the sanctification instinct is more important. Others will say that the survival instinct is more important. However, what of the reproductive instinct? The reproductive instinct is usually in the middle, and its satisfaction is determined by whether the people choose to give more importance to the sanctification instinct or the survival instinct. Those that prioritize and give more importance to the survival instinct are people that usually, or rather definitely, restrict their thinking to this world. They usually believe that there is no life, or even if they believe there is life, but they believe that the most important part of existence and being is this universe. Hence, it is the survival of the fittest. It's a jungle. The fitted, the most fitted individual survives. This biologist, the one that wrote The Origin of Species, Darwin, he invented the theory of variance and selection. And political scientists like Francis Fukuyama even established their political theories based on this survival instinct and based on this theory. Rather, I'm sorry, not the survival instinct, but the theory of variance and selection. The whole Western civilization is built on the survival is built on the survival instinct, meaning the survival instinct has major influence in the way their system is organized. And inshallah, in chapter 3, that's the intellectual leadership of Islam, we will understand even in more depth why is it that the West chose the survival instinct over the sanctification instinct. And we will see how, in the end, it influences the way they satisfy the reproductive instinct. But in this chapter, we will, inshallah, discuss how Islam sees it. How Islam sees it, how, and then we will see how then it satisfies even the survival instinct and the reproductive instinct, and more on the survival instinct in chapter 3, inshallah. So, as I was saying, we have authors like Francis Fukuyama establishing their theories like the variance and selection. They say it's when species survive a time of extinction, that's when they emerge as the selected ones. Because usually there are various species. They are usually the same type of like animals, but they differ in some ways. The ones that survive a very hard and harsh environment and situation are the selected ones, are the ones that survived. Francis Fukuyama applied this theory to assert that the downfall of the Soviet Union after the end of the Cold War indicates that the Western civilization is the most successful and strongest and most truthful civilization and way of life. Hence, he wrote history and the last man standing. He insisted on this theory in his more recent books like The Origins of Political Order and Political Order and Decay. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is so that we understand that these instincts, though they appear mild and rather irrelevant, they are actually the foundation of it all, of everything. And when I say the foundation of it all, I mean they are the reason we are assessing human behavior and understanding what influences it. And understanding what influences it. In the end, we establish then that human actions are all about solving the problem of organic needs and instincts. That's what it is in the end. Because if you look at it, there is no action that man takes, that man undertakes, that is not either related to the organic need or one of the instincts. So the question is on how to organize these instincts and organic needs. In other words, how to satisfy, how to organize the satisfaction of man's innate nature. So man's innate nature is a type that makes demands, and these demands are urges. These urges we mentioned, they are either the organic need must be satisfied. If not, there will be harm or even death. And the instincts, you need to satisfy it, but it is not an obligation. Rather, it is not necessary that man satisfy it, but its satisfaction is quite important actually. But it is not that if man does not satisfy it, he will be harmed, although there might be frustration or anger for not satisfying it. Now, before we move forward, I want to add on the issue of the instincts. What does it mean that they are externally provoked? What that means is that man has senses, and the instincts are triggered when man senses something. For instance, if a man sees a woman or a woman sees a man, the reproductive instinct is triggered, or parents with their children, the reproductive instinct gets triggered. This is why we see even animals with humans always trying to protect their children. And then the sanctification instinct is when it has to do with something that man reveres, something man respects and gives value value over anything else. Hence, we see the scientific value. You see that he feels all strong iman. As for the survival instinct, we see that when so it's from the manifestation of the survival instinct that man is brave or a coward. Yeah, it sounds surprising that how is it that two opposing things are from the same instinct? Isn't it that if an instinct produces not be able to produce cowardice? No. It is just an instinct, and man and how the person individually is. So some will react to certain realities bravely, and others will react cowardly. So this is why the solution has to be compatible with human nature, because in the end, it's all about organizing the satisfaction of this fitra, of this innate nature. So how is it then that if your solution contradicts the human nature, you insist that it is still the correct solution? We will believe, I believe we will agree that it is nonsensical and preposterous to even make that claim. Hence, when you check the book of many Islamic scholars and even Western philosophers and political theorists, political scientists, they all discuss human nature. In his The Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes, one of the pioneers of secularism and democracy in the West, wrote that he went in detail and discussed human nature. If you check Jean-Jacques Rousseau, I'm sure I'm not right nature. If you check David Hume, the atheist, he discussed human nature. If you discuss scholars like Imam Ghazali, they discussed human nature. If you check scholars like Ibn Khaldun, they discussed human nature. Why did they have to go? Why did they have to spend a lot of time discussing human nature? Because all of them were trying to prove that their theories and ideas were compatible with that nature, were correct. And everyone knows, if your idea is compatible with human nature, then they all try to prove that anything else contradicts human nature. Okay, so that's why, in order to support their idea, you find the Westerners basing it on the survival instinct, which is why we find that both ideologies that emanated from this survival instinct focus on the economy. You look at communism, you look at capitalism, they all focus on the economy because it's all about survival to them. They try to prove that their idea is correct based on trying to show how compatible it is with human nature, and hence the reason you will find different views about what the nature of man is. So you find that the communists have their say on it, and the capitalists have their say on it, and you have their say on it as well. So this is it. So the correct revival can only be attained when the comprehensive idea is compatible with human nature. But not just compatibility with human nature, it also has to be able to convince the mind. In other words, it has to be rational. It has to provide proof, because if it contradicts what the mind comprehends, then it cannot be true. But why does it have to convince the mind in the first place? This is because the mind functions and information is transferred to it through the senses. The senses carry information, or rather they carry the reality, and then they transfer it to the brain, and with the presence of experience and previous information, we establish the mind, meaning comprehension. Now, what the mind sees and accepts, it's always something that is factual. So anything gets easy when we actually realize that it cannot convince the mind if it addicts human nature. That's the fact. So if it is compatible with human nature, then I guarantee you it will be able to convince the mind. Its ability to convince the mind, in other words, is in its capability to be friendly, to be compatible with human nature. At the risk of sounding redundant, with truth, we look at the West, but because, as we believe, their revival is incorrect, you find out they have no peace of mind. They are always killing each other, fighting amongst themselves. You can see that right now Russia has invaded Ukraine, and the US orchestrated this invasion because it serves its political interest. And this political interest emanated from its foreign policies. Now, if we believe that humans fighting each other for no cause, for no reason, just for your selfish interest, we will agree that it contradicts human nature from the policies itself. But the policies will naturally, their contradiction with common sense is inherent. Why? Because their very foundation contradicts the nature of man. So what they seek, what they pursue, their goals will always cause instability and disasters. If they claim that the nation state is supposed to establish peace and harmony, but it doesn't, why? Why does it happen that way? It's because it contradicts human nature. Now, we will go deeply into this, inshallah, in chapter 3 as well. So chapter 3 is quite, will be quite an event, inshallah. So, so moving forward, he said, so now moving forward, we have true idea, how it is formed, what it is made of, and things like that. He said, the true solution, I'm reading this paragraph now, said the true solution cannot be reached except through the enlightened thought, al-fikr al-mustanir, about the universe, man, and life. Consequently, those who yearn for revival, nahda, and pursue the path of elevation, ruqi, must first solve this problem in a correct manner by utilizing it's none other than the aqidah, which serves as the intellectual basis, al-qa'idatul fikriyya, upon which every detailed thought about man's behavior and the systems of this life are built. Now, he said, the true solution cannot be reached except through the enlightened thought. What is the enlightened thought? The enlightened thought is supposed to be, or rather, the enlightened thought, we will go into the detail of what makes the enlightened thought, why it is the truth, and so on. But for now, what we should know is that the enlightened thought is the only correct comprehensive idea that leads to elevation. But this elevation does not elevate man from one aspect of life and then puts him down in another aspect. Rather, it elevates man from all aspects of life. In the previous sessions, we asked the question, if there is the claim that some civilizations lead to scientific progress, others lead to socio-economic progress, and another leads to religious progress. Here we are saying that the correct solution should actually lead to elevation in all these things. So the correct solution should be able to lead to scientific, religious, and socio-economic progress. And that's why it's the fikrul mustanir. But that's not actually what makes it enlightened thought. In order to understand this, we need to know that there are three types of thoughts, from the lowest to the highest level of thought, rather thinking. The lowest level is the shallow thinking, and it has a subsidiary of the narrow thinking. The shallow thought, shallow thinking leads to narrow, shallow ideas, shallow thoughts. And deep thinking is the second level. Deep thinking leads to deep thoughts. And then there is the enlightened thinking, which leads to enlightened thought. Now, shallow thinking is quite simple to understand. A shallow idea is, for instance, the moment I see a black flag, I decide it is ISIS or Boko Haram. Now, the problem with shallow thinking is that it's at face value, it might seem to be smart, full of wisdom and true. But you give it like 5 seconds, you think about it for 5 seconds to 10, you will realize it's actually quite absurd and childish. Because if by just looking at a black flag, you determine that a group or a certain person is a member of Boko Haram or ISIS, then what of the other people that are using it? That person did not ask, are there others using this flag? If there are, what makes a person a member of Boko Haram, ISIS, or any other group? He wouldn't go that far. The shallow thinker judges at face value. He doesn't look over the fence. He judges just what he sees in front of him. That's the shallow thinker for you. The shallow thinkers are usually unserious. This is a nature of a nation that fails. If the people of a nation are shallow in their thought, they do not think of progress. So if you're wondering, why is it we said that a revival is the quest, is every man's quest? But then there are nations that are not actually pushing progress. I think as to, because as Ibn Taymiyyah would say, al-Muslimu kayyisun. The Muslim is smart. The Muslim is not only smart, but has to be a genius when he thinks. And what makes him a genius is this aqidah of Islam, which happens to be the enlightened thought. But we haven't yet proved if it is the enlightened thought in the first place. So I'm just making claims right now that it's the enlightened thought. Okay? And then there is the deep thought. The deep thought is that level of thinking where a person searches and investigates vigorously. He goes deeply, looks at all aspects of the problem, and then comes up with a solution. But then guess what? The enlightened thought is exactly like that. The enlightened thought is exactly like the deep thought in terms of the level of investigation about the reality of the problem you are facing. Or rather, in some in university or school project, you'll say, okay, problem statement, right? You investigate, you state what the problem is, its nature, and what you're trying to solve, right? So it's something like that. The enlightened thought and the deep thought, they are absolutely the same when it comes to their level of investigation on the reality of the problem. What differentiates them? The difference is that the solution, because it's not only about understanding the problem itself, okay? Because a thinking process should lead to a thought, and a thought always contains judgment. That's why it's a thought. But if it's just an idea you have in your head, you don't you don't have a view. It says as information and knowledge. It's not thought. So thinking leads to thought, because at the end of it, there is always judgment. Okay? And solutions are nothing more than judgments. So enlightened thoughts and deep thoughts differ because the enlightened thought emanates from the correct intellectual basis. It emanates from the correct comprehensive idea. Whatever is it that we will establish as the correct aqidah serves as the intellectual, as the enlightened thought. Now, we do hear many people using the word aqidah loosely. If you differ on the way you say the takbir in salah, or how many times you raise your two hands in the salah, someone says you and I have different aqidah. if you say Salatul Qasr is restricted to 3 days and someone says it's no, even if it's a year, one will say, oh, you have a different aqidah. But this is a very wrong usage of the word. The aqidah, from the very nature of the word, refers to creeds, doctrine, foundation, and basis of things. As a matter of fact, if we say, for instance, the intellectual basis, al-qa'idatul fikriyah, the word aqidah and the word al-qa'idah are actually related, one way or the other. Even from their form, you will see that al-qa'idah, al-aqidah. So the aqidah refers to the foundation and the basis of things. Now, all these things we have been discussing, the meaning of life, all the origin question and so on, when you reach them, when you bring, like when you, it's like a package. Now this package is the aqidah. This aqidah is what we call the intellectual basis or the comprehensive idea. And I did mention that the comprehensive idea addresses that it is a terminology that refers to the aspect of the aqidah that addresses the origin questions, whereas the intellectual basis is a terminology that refers to the aqidah as a foundation for solutions to problems. Okay, so the difference between the deep thought, I repeat, and the enlightened thought is that the enlightened thought is the correct aqidah. It's a judgment, it's a solution that emanates from the correct aqidah, meaning it is compatible with human nature, it convinces the mind, and therefore it fills the heart with peace and tranquility. Whereas the deep thought doesn't necessarily do so. For instance, you will find a very wise scientist, let's take Elon Musk as an example. He's a very smart genius, but you can still call him an idiot, for instance, if you believe in God, if you believe in the hereafter. Why? Because though he's a deep thinker, his judgment, his conclusion is not enlightened. So hence, what makes the thought enlightened is that it is correct. It's that it has compatibility with the nature, convinces the mind, and leads to peace and tranquility. So inshallah, we will stop here. I don't know if anyone has any. So the room for questions and answers opened. Assalamu alaikum. It's actually, yes, your question answers the question. You know, it answers your question, which is it's their refusal to acknowledge the truth. Because if you look at the history of the West, is that they have preset conditions that deny them the truth. As we all know, their history is that they suffered under Christianity. That led them to the conclusion that religion as a system of life is problematic. Okay, they did acknowledge, and they still do acknowledge, that religion is essential to people. Okay, and you might even say they allow religion in order to control people. So regardless, the fact is suffering under Christianity made them conclude to them there is religions are all about belief in God, believe in the hereafter, do not sin, acquire, accumulate as much reward as you can. Therefore, they decided this lead to internal wars, as it did in Europe. So they are like principles that there is no way religion will be given consideration. So every single thing they did was in order to find a thought, an idea that does not go back to that issue of religious debates and discussions and bringing them into life. And that's why they will never be able to reach the truth, no matter how obvious it becomes to them. Of course, there might be a few individuals that accept the truth, but as a general system and civilization, they will never do. Why? Because they will not even let themselves explore the problem the right way. Why do you think they adopted the scientific method of thinking as a foundation? The scientific method is just a method of thinking, which means it is applied to a restricted field, a limited field. But then they had to find a way of extending and expanding it, making it discuss issues and matters that it doesn't apply to. But it serves their purpose. What is their purpose? Their purpose is to prove that even if God exists, man has the intellectual capability to solve his problems. Hence, they keep telling you the virtues and the virtues and how marvelous the mind and the human brain cells are, you know, its capacity and so on and so forth. These are arguments to show you that the human mind is capable of solving problems. So yes, it's true. They are unable to see the solution, the true solution, the true aqidah, because they won't let themselves do that. How? Because they set conditions that will never allow them to do that. This is because their experience led them into thinking that any religion is problematic. So you see, even their basis of thinking is just quite it's quite confusing. And if you look at it, there is no way they will accept God as an absolute truth. Why? Because if you ask the question, you say, what's the origin of thought, idea? We said that man requires previous information in order to understand anything. Now, who gave the first idea? Who gave the first previous information? How did it come into existence? You see, we Muslims, we know it came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allama Adam al-asma'a kullaha thumma aradahum ala al-malaika. Simple, problem solved. But to them, if they say that, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the first person that gave the most accurate, definite idea to man, then it means that any other idea has to come from God. They don't want that. Therefore, the evolution, some of them will say we come from amoeba, some from fish, or is it fishes, etc. They all came up with this idea in order to deny the fact that thoughts came from God. Hence, they say we evolved. So thought evolved with us. Man naturally comes up with ideas because his brain reflects on the matter, and the matter reflects on his brain, and hence he understands the thing, etc. It's not just the communists, it's the general Western way of thinking. Because if they accept that the first idea came from God, ooh la la, it destroys the very foundation of all their thoughts. So it's unacceptable to them. So you can see that they deny themselves the path to the truth. And hence as you mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about this kind of people. He blocks their path to the truth. But in reality, what it means is that the people do that to themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets them, because وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ, and we show him the two paths, meaning we show man the two paths, the good and the evil. Whichever one he chooses, we let him be. We do not control their actions, we let them be. So that's what it means. That's what it means. It's that they truth, because they are actually not only ignoring it, but they are forcefully creating paths and ways to avoid even giving it serious consideration. I hope this answers you clearly. وإياك. Okay. If there is no question or comment, inshallah we'll close and meet next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala. Oh, and then he left. Maybe network. Okay, maybe we should give him a moment to see if he can. Okay, so inshallah we'll stop here and we can meet next week at the same location, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أمة واحدة دولة واحدة راية